All right, it is officially the top of the hour, so let's go ahead and get started. Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is the last webinar in our three-part series on how to start, grow, and ultimately maintain a dominating DUI firm web presence. Today we're going to talk about the domination phase for DUI attorneys. As a reminder, today's webinar is being recorded and will be available to replay online next week. And we also make the slides available, so there's no need to take notes unless you'd like to. We have a lot of ground to cover today. This webinar is scheduled to run for 2 hours. It may run a little over or a little under, just depending upon how quickly we get through the content. We're not going to be able to stop to answer questions during the presentation, but if you are having technical difficulties with the GoToWebinar audio or video, let us know in the chat area of the GoToWebinar control panel. And we're going to have a questions and answers session at the end of this presentation. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to add them to the questions area or send us a public or private chat message and we'll address it at the end. For those of you who aren't familiar with me, my name is Victoria Blute and I'm the community manager here at LALinux. My job is to keep attorneys on the cutting edge of web technologies and online legal marketing and to help you learn what works on the web. I come from a journalism background, and if you happen to be a frequent reader of our blog or a frequent attendee of our webinars, you may be familiar with me. If you joined us for the first 2 webinars in this series, you'll remember that I went into great detail about how search engines work, about various types of content that lawyers should include when starting their website. And in the second part of this series, I went ahead and explored how social media can work with your law firm's website to amplify your firm's signal and extend your reach and reinforce your reputation. Joining me today, I have Rachel Shalott, who holds a JD and a master's and practiced law before joining LALinux. And if you attended the first webinars in this series, you're likely already familiar with her, but I'd like to give her just a brief introduction here. She's the Vice President of Content Operations here at LALinux, which means that she's in charge of all of our content operations, which produces millions of written words for our members' websites and blogs each year. And in the first 2 webinars in this series, Rachel demonstrated the basic building blocks of content to get law firms started in the right direction, and then built on that information in the Grow series to take you deeper into the strategy and execution of growing a DUI web presence. Before Rachel and I present, I also want to introduce you to our CEO, Attorney Dan Jaffe, and I want to spend a bit of time on a few foundational items as well. So before Dan became the full-time CEO of LALinux, he built 2 successful law firms in both Washington State and Arizona, and he started a highly successful online legal directory that was later acquired by a large internet company. And during Dan's years of practice, he himself will tell you that he made a lot of marketing investments and he also got badly burned several times. But what this led him to realize was that nobody cared about his practice like he did, and that in order for him to succeed, he needed to understand how the internet functions, how potential clients were using the internet, and he needed to be in control of his marketing. And he did the heavy lifting to figure this out early on, and that's why he co-founded LALinux, to make it easy for attorneys to be in control of their marketing without wasting their time or money. And today he loves showing fellow attorneys how this stuff really works. So what is LALinux? I want to briefly review who we are and what we do and why it matters. So you have many choices of companies and technologies to design, build, host, and help you market your law firm's website. And at LALinux, we do all of that, and we also have a lot of competition. So what is LALinux? How are we different? Our company is obsessed with the pursuit of the most efficient method of marketing for each law firm. There are 2 major variables of efficiency as we see it, and that's time and money. And LALinux was created to empower law firms to have unlimited marketing success without wasting time or without wasting money. And we have 2 different types of competitors. on one side, we have the full-service marketing companies like FindLaw and Martindale Nolo, and LALinux is built to give attorneys all of the upsides of using a full-service company without exposing you to the potential risks and downsides. And on the other side, we have do-it-yourself website software programs like WordPress and Wix that are cheap or free to use. And these programs come with steep opportunity costs, and attorneys often struggle to make them work, which has them wasting their time and missing opportunities along the way. So while both full-service companies and do-it-yourself platforms are viable options, LALinux offers a more practical solution for lawyers. Our company works exclusively with lawyers, and our services are adaptable to every stage of a law firm's growth. Our members can start as small as they choose and then grow as big as they decide without taking dangerous risks or committing to things that might not work. And our software was built exclusively for lawyers, so the learning curve is really easy, which enables our members to add to and edit their websites and turn their efforts into new business without struggling. So if you're joining us in this webinar after having seen the Start and the Grow series for DUI attorneys, then you probably have a good sense of where we might be headed. But for those of you who are joining us for the very first time, I want to give you the framework for where you are in this webinar series to make sure that you're in the right place. So this three-part series for DUI attorneys lays out a clear roadmap for successful legal marketing because we recognize that the path to cost-effective and efficient law firm marketing online is often very unclear for attorneys. Sometimes it's a problem of not knowing what to do or what works. Other times, attorneys may understand what they need to do, but they're not sure how to do it, and I think that's an important distinction to make. And other times, it's a matter of getting distracted by the latest trend or getting tripped up by SEO sales talk and other things that can keep you from your goals. But to do this right, we recommend implementing the information in this series in chronological order. So here is a quick review of what was discussed in the first two parts of this series. So in the Start series, we explained how to get started with a law firm web presence. And that's whether you are brand new to online legal marketing or if you have a website, but it's just not working for your firm. And in that webinar, we laid the groundwork for marketing your DUI firm with sound and sustainable strategies and how to use that foundation to take your marketing where you want it to go. So we explained the basics and showed you that really to start smart, you need to be able to do just a couple things really well. And so long as you avoid the traps and the tricks, that foundation will take you as far as you want. Then in the Grow series, we went over a variety of tools and tips that can assist you in your long-term content strategy, as well as how to understand the key performance indicators that help you market your firm effectively without wasting your time or your money. And we discussed a lot of the vanity metrics that SEO salespeople and legal marketers sometimes use that can confuse attorneys and send them down the wrong path or keep them on the hook without having anything real to show for it. And now we're at the dominate phase. So this is going to show you, as it says here, how to climb to the top and stay there without wasting your time or your money, and also without having to watch your back. So if you haven't seen the first two webinars in this series, that's okay. I certainly encourage you to stay and listen to what we have to say today, but I also recommend that you go back and watch those first two webinars because, as I'm about to explain, trying to implement these tactics out of order is very unlikely to produce the kind of results that you want. It's about knowing what to do, how to do it, and in what order those things need to be done. So, a question that you may have thought about, or maybe you haven't yet, is this. When should I enter this phase? When am I ready to dominate my market? And the answer to that question is based on several things. First, it's a matter of understanding those fundamentals and applying them. And that's why you're going to hear me and Rachel probably keep stressing that if you haven't seen those first 2 webinars in this series, go back and watch them. And it's not just about the knowledge is power aspect here. It's knowledge and action that matters. So knowing what's going to move the needle is one thing. Actually applying those fundamentals to your law firm's web presence consistently over time is another. So make sure that you have that solid content foundation for your law firm's website and blog, and that you have a plan and strategy as you're moving forward. The next thing that's worth considering when you're wondering when you'll be ready to enter this particular phase of your law firm's growth is looking at some data that's related to your law firm's web presence. How many visits is your site getting? And this isn't a cut and dry number for every DUI firm out there. Your geography is going to play a part in this as well. So, for example, if you're part of a smaller market, you might be ready to start thinking about dominating your market if you're getting 200 visits a day. However, if you are in a much larger market and a much more competitive market, something like Los Angeles, for example, then this number might shoot up to 1,000 visits a day before you're ready to start thinking about this phase. So knowing your total addressable market is important as well. And if you were with us for the second part of this series, you probably heard Dan and I discuss this concept when we were talking about growth risks in terms of attorneys who sometimes are focused on what's ultimately an unsupportable market. They're trying to squeeze more business out of it than the market supports. But the bottom line there was that it's essential to know what your total addressable market is and to optimize your marketing for that reality. So we have attorney members here at LALinux who are now in the dominate phase after following our advice from the Start and Grow webinars, and who have avoided traps and tricks that so often get attorneys into trouble, and their websites are now receiving tens of thousands of visits in a month, and often thousands of visits in a day. And whether you're a LALinux member right now or you're thinking about becoming one and you want a roadmap for how to get there, reach out to us and we'll put together a comprehensive plan for your firm that can help you achieve those goals. So at LALinux, there are a couple things that we firmly believe. The first is that having a law firm website that you own and that you control, when paired with an investment and a solid content strategy, can become an appreciating asset for you and your firm. And we also see it that there are 2 things that you can invest into your online marketing, and in particular your law firm website and blog. One is money, the other one is time. And as it often goes in life, there's a chance that you'll have more of one than the other, depending upon where you are in the growth phases of your firm. So let's first consider the case of a young attorney who's just starting out. This young attorney may not have a lot of money to play around with and may not have a lot of clients yet, but what they might have is time. And therefore, writing their own content could be a smart investment of the time that they have available to them. As we have said previously, the internet is really a great equalizer, and marketing has become a meritocracy, so you no longer have to have the biggest budget in the game in order to compete. So if this young attorney happens to have more time available than money, if they have a solid content plan and a clear roadmap, then they can use their time wisely to produce their own substantive content and blog posts that puts their firm on the board and helps them get noticed by potential clients. Now, as they move along and their business starts to grow, they're going to have more clients and they're going to be making more money. And at this point, they may still want to continue writing their content, but they may choose to delegate a little of their content as well, even if they themselves are continuing to add to their website. But here's the problem. So as you grow, particularly as you are taking on more and more clients, writing your own content has an opportunity cost. As you're growing and growing, you're suddenly going to have some serious demands placed on your time. It's why we mentioned in the last webinar that it's really worth thinking about things like intake systems and so on before you get to this point, because you don't want to let yourself get overwhelmed. But one of the things that you're going to have to think about as these demands are placed on your time is the opportunity cost of writing your own content, because the choice has to be made between what is often mutually exclusive, money or time. So to illustrate this point, let's look at how our content creation department here at LALinux actually evolved. So when we first started, our early adopters were really excited about writing content. For the very first time, they had access to a system that would not only allow them to easily publish optimized content to their own websites and blogs, but they had our system to make sure that they were doing it well. Attorneys who use LALinux to write their own content and follow our recipe over time are successful, and they achieve market-leading results. And as a byproduct of this success, they become busier in their practices. And what this presents, unfortunately, is a catch-22 for attorneys who also want to sleep and have a work-life balance. They know that the content that they're writing using LALinux is fueling their success, but their success is preventing them from continuing to write or demanding other sacrifices. So in order to keep up with the reward cycle of writing content, many of our early adopters here at LALinux realized that in order to sustain that edge that they got through content writing using LALinux, that they needed to delegate that task to somebody else. And our content creation department actually evolved out of that need. So the more clients you've got, the less time you have to keep writing content. And you can't just stop writing content, because having new content added to your site is an important factor that Google takes into consideration for rankings and relevancy. So the freshness of your content is something that Rachel is going to discuss in depth in just a moment. But to keep the flywheel moving, you have to have new content. And if new demands are being placed on your time and you can't write it because you want to be focused on the practice of law, then, you know, your rankings could suffer, which would then likely harm your revenue, and the whole thing can fall apart. So it's this complicated dance because, you know, of course you want to keep up that momentum that you've worked so hard for. And this is where that other investment comes into play. Money. So if you're in the dominate phase, you have a marketing budget to work with that is likely larger than what a beginning attorney would have. So you may not have the time to write anymore, but you do have the money. And here's where it may be time to delegate your content creation efforts to somebody else. And before I get into how to do this wisely, there's a few other points I want to make, particularly on the ethics of ghostwriting. So there is a camp of purists on the web who argue that attorneys should always, under all circumstances, write their own content for their law firm websites and blogs. And in an ideal world, we agree with that. But in the real world, where balancing a practice with the business side of law while trying to maintain a quality of life, you know, you can see where I'm going with this. So those who argue against proxy writing of online content point out this, that, you know, if the attorney doesn't write their own website content, that it lacks authenticity, or that the content misleads readers into believing that the content, you know, came directly from the attorney. Some argue that it's unethical, and some assert that all lawyers are natural writers or love writing, or should not only provide the content for their websites, but should also enjoy doing so. And each of these arguments contains logical and practical fallacies. We've gone into greater detail about the ethics of ghostwriting in a webinar that's available now on demand over at the LALinux website that specifically addresses that topic. But my point is this. If you are comfortable delegating the creation of a brief, proofreading it, and then signing your name onto it and submitting it to the court, then this analogy is exactly the same when a ghostwriter is writing content for you. So now on to delegating successfully. In order to use a ghostwriter successfully, it comes down to a couple things. You need to be able to delegate wisely. You need to empower people that understand and are going to abide by the necessary ethics. And also you need to be able to keep a level of editorial control that makes you feel comfortable saying that as the attorney who's responsible for the content on your website, you know what's being published. And by choosing a professional writer that you can hold accountable, what you do is that you maintain a consistent publishing schedule, which ensures that your website and blog aren't going to be neglected. We've seen plenty of law firm websites that have these large bursts of content creation, especially on the blog, you know, 10 posts in a month, and then the blog goes dormant for months or years. And content marketing isn't optimally effective when you simply put some content on your blog and then quit. It works best with the consistent publication of posts that answer your clients' questions in great detail. So it's easy to get enthusiastic about blogging for short periods of time, but it is harder to sustain that enthusiasm over the long term. Persistence with blogging and other forms of content creation on your law firm's website on a regular basis is what is going to get you ahead. So if you pause your blogging efforts, your competition who isn't pausing, say, a well-funded firm who's delegating their content to writers, or an attorney fresh out of law school with all the time in the world to blog, will get you ahead, or will get ahead of you rather, if you're not adding content to your law firm's website and blog on a regular basis. So just a couple things before I hand this over to Rachel. I want to briefly point out something. So if you are a LALinux member or you've been with us for a few webinars, then you know how easy it is to use our system to add to and edit your website. And what we also make it easy to do is allowing you to delegate those tasks to others, such as, in the case that you have a partner or an associate who's going to blog, or a summer intern or something like that. But on top of that, we also make it really easy for you to have control in the case where you hire a professional proxy writer. So the LALinux user access controls that are featured in our control panel make delegating this work to others a total breeze without relinquishing the kind of control that attorneys need over their web presence. So as you can see here, you can add an unlimited number of users, and then for each user, indicate who that person is ghostwriting for. So as you can see in this example, we have a summer associate who's going to ghostwrite for Dan here. And as you can see as well, that little blue checkbox says requires approval before publishing. So that makes sure that you have control over what goes on your website, even if you have somebody else ghostwriting for you. And there are additional permissions that you can select here as well to ensure that the person who is writing has as little or as much access to things like your sites, if you have multiple sites, blog posts, case results, social media, making sure that they have access to what you see them fit to have access to. So if you're curious to learn more about the effective use of ghostwriters, I really recommend checking out a webinar that we did on that subject a little while ago. And the web address to access it is at the bottom of your screen right there. One last point I want to make to you is this. So your time is valuable, and especially so if you're in the domination phase of your law firm's growth. The quality content that you add to your law firm's website on a regular basis is the key to starting and growing a successful web presence and ultimately dominating your market. But if you can't write for your website on a regular basis, then using a professional proxy writer is the next best choice that you can make. And as I said earlier, the LALinux content department evolved out of that very specific need. Attorneys who had been writing their own content, and as a result of it, got so successful that they needed help to keep publishing. And today we're writing millions of words of content for attorney websites and blog. And Rachel Shalott, who's going to speak to you in just a moment, is the Vice President of Content Operations and oversees this whole effort. But before I turn it over to her, I want to briefly talk about our content creation services for those who are interested. We have an in-house content creation department that is managed by lawyers. Many of our writers are lawyers as well. All of them have strong writing and legal backgrounds, and all of the content that gets published on behalf of our customers who choose us to write for them goes through an editorial process where lawyers have a look at that before it ever gets published. And we have several levels of content creation that we provide. These are services ranging from startup content, where there's a brand new site that doesn't have any content to get it off the ground, to creating attorney bios, practice areas, and so forth, all the way up to these really extensive build-outs of, 1 million words for attorneys who want to, over the course of a year or more, build a dominating website for a certain practice area or practices, and for certain geographic areas as well. But between those extremes, we also have a la carte content. So say that you're writing your own content and maybe you've got a big trial coming up and you don't want to have a lag in that content. We can jump in, pick up where you left off, and sustain that until you can jump back in and start working on it again. And we also have the ability to do ongoing recurring monthly blogging and content creation for our clients. So what I want to say here is that at LALinux, we really pride ourselves on having more than just a vendor-customer relationship with you. We take a lot of time at the outset to get to know you and to create a partnership that allows you to participate as little or as much as you want in the creation of your law firm website content. We like to know how you like to write your content written, or how you like your content written in terms of the voice that you use, getting to know your objectives, getting to know your practice area. We're going to look at what you're trying to accomplish, what you've already accomplished, and we're going to make a plan to get there. So with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Rachel, who's going to give you some more information about content and what that should look like when you're in the domination phase of your law firm's growth. Rachel?
Thank you so much, Victoria. As you heard earlier, prior to joining LALinux, I practiced criminal defense in Pennsylvania, and I now oversee the LALinux content department. We work with our attorney clients to plan, create, and refine their web content. When we work with firms who are in this dominate phase, we generally see content structured in the following ways. First off, most importantly, there is a very substantial base of evergreen or substantive pages. If you are with us in our Grow section, I discussed achieving a target size for your market area. Over the past few years, we've been conducting market research to see what makes attorney sites that utilize organic content marketing successful in a variety of metro areas across the United States. And the one constant we always see is that the dominating sites have the highest page volume for their market area. Substantive pages include practice area pages, reputational pages, and local pages. And the best thing about organic content marketing is that this space will be your single most valuable asset, and you're going to get an incredibly high ROI. The bulk of time and resources will go into that initial build. And this can be a very substantial undertaking when we've executed these really in-depth long-term content builds. We see these span 18 months. They can range up to 2 to 3 years. As Victoria said, we can write up to 1 million words for a particular site because that's the end goal, is to get to that dominate position. But the reason why this investment is absolutely worth it is because the value from your content build, that initial build, will only grow and grow and appreciate over time. After you've achieved a substantial size, you can kind of shift from the creation or addition phase to kind of what we think as being an enhancement or maintenance mode. And what I mean by enhancing your website is that you're going to start to add collateral to the site that really increases the appeal of the site to visitors, to potential clients. And we're going to discuss potential enhancements to your site, including things such as infographics and white papers, in just a few minutes. But right now, I'd like to focus on blogging. Blogging can serve a variety of purposes. Blog content can be shared via social media, increasing the range of your potential audience. And blog content also has the potential to be interactive. That is, potential clients post and comment, opening up a new channel of communication with your firm. However, we sometimes see firms who sort of neglect blogging because they think that if their blog content doesn't have a certain level of activity on social media, or if a particular post doesn't receive comments regularly, it isn't really doing anything for them. And this line of thinking is problematic, especially when you're in the dominate phase, because it neglects an important role that blog content can play for a site, and that is to keep a site fresh. So reaching a desired build of your evergreen pages is important to establish your site as an authority in a particular area. And the size of your site is going to be instrumental in getting strong search engine rankings. But as we see here in an excerpt from Google's Search Engine Optimization Starter Guide, it's really important that your content is not only unique, but that it is fresh. And this doesn't mean that you need to make regular, drastic changes to your site. However, we've seen that even when a site dominates a major market area, if nothing is added to that site for a particular period of time, it can kind of start to slip in the rankings. And search engines will favor newer, but smaller. And the competitive value can slip, can be hurt by this. So this is where we've really seen that blogging does play an important role. Blogging regularly will help keep your site fresh, and it will help with that critical element that search engines are looking for. It's really going to help you maintain your strong ranking. And we found that adding a few blog posts per week can really help to prevent any type of decline in rankings. And another thing blog posts can do is they can be a base for a higher level of interaction with your potential clients, and as well as former and current clients, in that a lot of times when we have attorneys who are in this dominant phase, they are not only writing blogs, but they're communicating with their clients via newsletters. Newsletters can be something that are sent out weekly, maybe on a monthly basis, maybe once per quarter. And a lot of times what we see firms do is they're highlighting a particular story or two that they've written about on their blog that they think would be very interesting to their audience. Something unique has happened. A potential change in the law has been maybe announced, and they're kind of giving their opinion on it. So what you're kind of doing is you're taking out of the blog posts that you've written, you're picking the ones that you think would most resonate with your audience. And what you can do then is craft newsletters that are sent via direct mail to those on the list that you've captured, or a list you maintain from, like I said, current clients, potential clients, former clients. So you're keeping that level of communication fairly high, and it has that personal touch. The newsletters are coming from you. They're going to be branded, consistent with your branding guidelines coming from your firm. Again, it just gives you that extra way to remain consistently present in the minds of your audience and the minds of potential clients. And now I want to shift over to substantive pages. So there are two major things I'd like to address here when we're in the dominant phase. And the first is enhancing your site volume. So when you've reached this point, your site contains a multitude of pages that directly relate to your practice area and the services that your firm offers. In our earlier webinar series, you may have heard me caution against attorneys using any of their valuable time or resources to cover topics that don't directly relate to exactly what your firm does. But once we've reached, or we're striving to reach, this very dominant position, I really changed my tune on this. Now is the time to start adding these pages. Pages that are basically educational in nature and do not directly relate to a service you're going to be providing. For example, say you practice in a jurisdiction where cycling under the influence of alcohol doesn't carry criminal penalties. If you're just starting out or starting to grow your site, you don't want to waste any time or resources covering a topic from which you're not going to obtain clients or any revenue. So this would not be included in your initial content plan. However, once we've comprehensively covered all the types of cases you do take, really in detail, and we're adding those child pages, we're getting very specific with everything, we've sort of exhausted those topics, you have the ability, and you absolutely should, start to branch out and cover related topics. And these can be crimes which they might automatically go through a diversionary program. They can be things such as, like I said, cycling under the influence, even when that's not doesn't carry criminal penalties, or let's say pages on expungement if your jurisdiction doesn't permit DUI offenses to be expunged. These pages themselves won't directly lead to a particular business from that particular topic, but what they're doing is they're adding to the overall authority of your site on impaired driving offenses for a particular area. So take a look, if you take a look at dominating sites in cities like Atlanta, Los Angeles, you're going to find that covered on those sites are a wide variety of topics. Clearly not only those where, the firm might potentially gain business. The breadth of these ancillary topics that you cover, it needs to be consistent with, your target size. So this will depend on geographic location, what your competitor's doing, where you're located. If this is ranging from major metro area to a small rural town, that's going to dictate, the amount that's really necessary to get your site to being this dominating resource. And next I wanted to talk about updating your substantive pages. The reason why when we talk about these pages, we do label them as evergreen pages, is that the content on them is unlikely to change. However, of course, there will be changes in state or federal legislation, and that will make it necessary to update these pages on your site. So, for example, let's say that the state legislature increases the fines imposed for a first offense DUI in your state. When you have a very large site, it can be incredibly difficult to locate every instance where you reference that particular statute. So one thing we really recommend that firms do is to create some type of resource. A spreadsheet can be a really easy way to do this. But what you want to do is you want to keep an index of where, in terms of exactly what pages, you have particular statutory information or particular information that might be subject to change. And that way, if there is an announced change coming up, you can make a game plan and you can easily locate the pages you'll need to update. And now I'd like to speak about those site enhancements that I mentioned earlier. There are many different types of collateral that you can add to your site, which really enhances the experience a user has when they're visiting their site. There are other things, such as ebooks, but I'm going to take some time and talk about two particular types that we've seen can be quite effective. And these are white papers and infographics. So white papers, generally 3 to 7 pages, we see they cover a particular topic in really great detail. So, for example, you might create a white paper that gives a comprehensive overview of, car insurance coverage for someone who's been convicted of a DWI in your state. And these documents serve many purposes. We've seen firms use them for all different kinds of things. We've seen firms use them as not only an educational resource for a visitor who's kind of coming to a site and they want a really nuanced understanding of a particular topic, but also we've seen firms use them in a bit of a more traditional sense. They can be a print resource. So we've had some firms who mail relevant packets, including these particular white papers, to clients who come in for an initial consultation about a particular type of case, and they have particular concerns. Other firms might take white papers and kind of have them for distribution in an area where they might have potential clients, such as a building that holds AA meetings, or another place where it might be relevant audience. And then as far as density of information goes, infographics are kind of on the other end of the spectrum from white papers. So they illustrate concepts in graphical form, with the focus much more on the visual depiction of information rather than the text. So, for an example, you might create an infographic demonstrating how alcohol is metabolized by the human body and how weight can play an important role in impairment. Infographics can greatly enhance the experience a visitor has on your site. They capitalize upon the strong preference that many users have for easily digestible visual information and the shortened attention span we've seen over the past few years as technology continues to become more sophisticated and as people are used to seeing information presented to them in shorter form, with things such as smartphone use rapidly increasing. We're seeing a strong trend towards that smaller attention span. People want the information, but they want it very quickly. They want to be able to understand quickly and kind of move on. And additionally, infographics are highly shareable. If you're thinking of ones you may have seen, this might have been on social media because they are incredibly popular on social media. They're easy, like I said, they're easy to see on a mobile device. They're easy to understand. They get things across quickly. And there are tools available for creating free infographics, but that's never something we recommend that law firms do. I really do want to just throw in a word of caution here. The most effective infographics, white papers, the most effective of any type of this additional collateral need to really adhere to the branding guidelines of your firm. So you want your colors and you want your logo to remain consistent across any platform, print, digital, billboard, these types of things. And you also really want to make sure that the colors you're using in branding guidelines, colors are being used with colors that are not only complementary in terms of the color palette, but they're also utilized appropriately to evoke the desired response from your audience. So this might change based on the topic that you're focusing on. And if you were with us during the Grow series of our webinars, you heard Sophia, who's one of our senior designers, discuss the psychological element of colors. Different colors have been found to evoke different emotional responses, and this is something that should absolutely be taken into account when creating these types of collateral for your site. And so it's just very difficult to use a template system and maintain that consistency with your brand guidelines, as well as ensuring the proper use of complementary colors. And like I said, it's just generally something that we advise against. For the firms who are on the LALinux platform, we have the same team of graphic and web designers who imported and configured or who created a logo at the outset. That same team is going to be responsible for creation of any additional collateral that we add, so things such as white papers, infographics. It's very, very important to us that we ensure all the visual elements remain consistent, and that they are embedded seamlessly into your website, and they're appropriately configured for both desktop and mobile users. So when you're just starting out and when you're growing your site, the focus is on content creation, because our goal then is getting more visitors to your site. But once you've reached the dominate phase, you're up there. You're getting that high volume of visitors to your site. So what you really want to do is you want to give them the best experience that they possibly can. You're up in the upper echelon, so you're competing against other firms who are there too. And once you've got there, the goal is, what we're all competing for, is giving our users a very memorable, positive, and unique website experience. And another thing that's going to happen when you've reached the phase where you're dominating your market area, chances are you're going to be experiencing some changes along the way. These might be minor, such as, adding some associates, support staff, or they might be pretty major, such as bringing on a new partner, changing the name of your firm, planning a major expansion. When you're faced with a major change, it's really critical to keep your web presence in mind and develop a plan of action as early as you're able to, just as you might plan and execute other necessary steps for this change, such as leasing office space. So if your firm will be experiencing a change in name, are you going to keep your logo the same? Oftentimes, logo change can be necessary, as partner initials are a common element of law firm logos. And if you must change your logo, are you going to be changing other graphical elements? Are you going to be changing your branding guidelines? Will your colors change? Or do you want to keep things the same? And if you're expanding or moving to a new office location, does this warrant additional web content? Or maybe just merely in addition to your office location pages? And if you are adding new offices or new locations or expanding where you practice, do you need to review your existing calls to action, which appear on the bottom of each page, to make sure that the new geographic information is properly communicated to potential clients? If you're faced with a very sudden change, such as a partner or an associate leaves to start a rival firm, how will you handle this as far as your website is concerned? And one of the main reasons why we design LALinux to kind of give attorneys the highest degree of control possible is because we want to empower them to be able to quickly make changes when things like this happen, because they do happen fairly frequently. You have a significant staff change that you have very little warning. So that's why we give you the ability to easily unpublish one page or page groups if you need to make quick, unanticipated changes. And this kind of gives you time to implement a behind-the-scenes strategy as you're sort of figuring these things out. So it's a good idea to keep these concerns on your radar and just sketch out a tentative plan of action for how you might handle potential changes should they arise in the future. And finally, a change, and a very positive one, that we commonly see with firms who are in this dominate phase is expansion. Firms who are really dominating a particular market now have the ability to expand into new geographic regions. So sometimes this might be a new metro area, sometimes an additional state, a tri-state area, and sometimes it's even in a nationwide expansion. So when you're preparing for an expansion, there are some concerns related to your web presence that you want to address. Again, much like when you're facing a substantial change, it's something that you should really develop a plan of action for as early as you feasibly can. So a common concern when facing expansion is often how to add content for a new geographic area. Now, we've seen firms integrate new content into existing sites very successfully, but we've also seen some launch multiple sites, and this can be a very effective tactic as well. And there are a variety of concerns to kind of weigh when you're deciding how to proceed. So there might be ethical implications. For example, some states require particular disclaimer language to be located somewhere on each web page that even maybe needs to be a particular size to be readable to a visitor. Other states require that content must be submitted to the state's bar for review prior to publication. So if you find yourself in a circumstance in which having separate sites might better ensure compliance with state bar regulations, this might be the best route to take. But some firms choose to create separate sections for new geographic regions in their existing sites. And doing so can add to the overall authority of the site. And it also allows these new sections to benefit from the strong presence of the existing content. In addition, if you're taking on a new practice area, you might be presented with the same issues. Incorporating a new practice area on your site can have the benefits of your established presence. But if you're seeking to kind of maybe highlight one element of your firm in particular, this is something we spoke about a little bit more in depth during our Grow webinar. When you really are, you have something you kind of want to do almost a spin-off. You have something that you think it makes your firm sort of unique, a unique element. Maybe it's the background of a particular associate, some element of your firm that you really want to capitalize upon. This is when it might be warranted to open open a second site or have multiple sites, because what you're doing isn't quite competing against your existing site, and you don't want to add that element into your site because you don't want to alienate your initial audience if you're trying to sort of seek a new audience or kind of take maybe a different marketing tactic. This is when you might want to explore having multiple sites. And then finally, we've seen a lot of dominant firms engage in what I call informational expansion. And this is when firms aren't planning on expanding into new jurisdictions, but the information on their website expands to new areas. So for example, maybe writing a very, very in-depth section on DUI penalties in all 50 states. So even if there's no plan to really expand to these other states, what this does is this opens up a lot of avenues to make the site visit experience much more rich in terms of integrating elements such as maybe a clickable map, infographics, more of these visual rich, really engaging visual elements. But doing so also really establishes your firm as the ultimate authority on a particular subject. And then just to wrap up, if you have any more specific questions regarding content for your site, I really, really encourage you to reach out to us. You can shoot us an email. We can be reached at writing@LALinux.com. Some of you might already be familiar with her, but Alyssa Rhodes is the director of our content services. And over the past couple of years, she's helped many, many attorneys plan, create, and execute very detailed content plans. So if you have a brief question, you want some additional resources, or maybe some assistance planning for long term, we're more than happy to help. And I'm now going to turn the mic back over to Victoria, who's going to cover a few more critical elements before we wrap up for the day.
Thanks, Rachel. So a few last things that I want to mention before we complete this webinar. And one of them is the risks that you face at this stage of your growth. So some of these are going to be familiar to you if you've been with us for the first two parts of this series. And some of the risks that you'll face at this stage may be new. So the first is bad practices. And this one is a risk to you at any point throughout your law firm's growth. But in this stage, it can be particularly dangerous because of all the work that you've put in already and all the progress that you've made. And bad practices here can include things that you do yourself or things that you may not know are being done on your behalf by someone else that you've hired to handle part of your web presence. Bad links are one of those things that can cause trouble. Other things like duplicate pages and content. But if you need a refresher on all of the bad practices that can get you into trouble with Google, I definitely recommend that you go check out Google's Webmaster Guidelines to make sure that you stay on the right side of things. And if you have someone else handling some aspect of your web presence, that you know what is being done and why and whether that's in line with what Google expects. So algorithm changes, this one is sort of related to the first one in some degree because if you have been engaging in bad practices, particularly ones that go against Google's Webmaster Guidelines, you could be in trouble the next time Google makes an algorithm change. Keep in mind that at scale, bad practices are amplified. So the more visible you are, plus whatever bad practices you engage in, the more likely it can be that someone is going to report your practices to the internet authorities, if you will, and the more likely that it is that all of the work that you have done up to this point can come tumbling down. So when you have a solid content strategy that focuses on providing value and useful information to your potential clients, and when you understand the rules of Google, and you're not going to have to sweat the next time that Google makes an algorithm change because you're not going to be worried that the whole thing is going to come tumbling down. You'll know that what you're doing is on the right track. The target on your back. So I recognize that sounds a little ominous, but the higher you climb and the more success that you have, the more that you may find that others are going to try to copy what you are doing. And that includes sometimes downright copying your content. The content that you create may not only attract potential clients, but competitors too. And that can be really frustrating after all the work that you've put in to create this work that's original and useful for your potential clients, to have someone, come along and copy it for their own website. Now, if you find someone is stealing your content, there are some things that you can do. There are definitely tools you can use for detection in the first place. Google Alerts is a good one. Copyscape is another choice. But if you do happen to find your work elsewhere on the web, here are some other tactics that you can employ. The first thing that you may want to try is picking up the phone and calling the attorney who is copying your content. We have talked a lot in this webinar series about things that are being done for attorneys by legal marketers and webmasters and copywriters that the attorneys who hire them may not even know about. And this could be a case like that. It's possible that this attorney hired someone and that person lifted your content for this attorney's site. So calling the attorney directly can sometimes resolve this issue, and it doesn't hurt to follow up your phone call with an email too, which of course provides you with a record of your request and what was said as well. But if that doesn't work, either you can't reach the person by phone or by email, or they refuse to remove the content, then there's always the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, or the DMCA. And a DMCA takedown is when content is removed from a website at the request of the owner of the content or the owner of the copyright. But at the end of the day as well, keep in mind that your time is very valuable and you only have so much of it. And if you spend too much time running around after people who are trying to copy your work, that of course can take away from your ability to produce more content for your site, and perhaps more importantly, keeps you from being focused on your practice. So it's really a balance there. The last point is sabotage. So sabotage can show up in a variety of forms. Of the many reasons that we caution against using pay-per-click marketing, for example, to carry your law firm's marketing, there's click fraud. If a competitor knows that you are using PPC, they might just click on your ads because they can, which of course costs you money without anything to show for it. And as we've said in previous webinars, PPC comes with some risks that in that people who are clicking on your ads, that might be an accidental click, they might be potential clients, but they might also be competitors. And whether or not that person is an actual potential client who may actually convert, once that money is gone, it's gone. Another form of sabotage that could come up, though this would take an extraordinary amount of time and effort on the part of whoever was responsible, is submitting your site to link farms and directories that have been sources of spam. I will say this, though, that once you are really well established, as you would be at the domination phase of growth, and you have these huge content build-outs with millions of words and tons of useful information for your potential clients, and you're generating a lot of revenue from that work, if somebody were to do that, it would be established pretty quickly that you were likely not responsible for such a thing. It wouldn't make sense that you would do something like that after all of the work that you have put in. However, one of the more likely methods of sabotage that you might see would be a competitor who hires somebody or a company to try and smear your reputation. And that is why we really stress, as we did in the last webinar, to get on top of your reputation management early. And ask for reviews often. Start building those resources early on. Here at LALinux, as we've said, we offer a Bird Eye reputation management add-on for our attorney members, and we also offer it to our non-members, just not as deeply discounted as it is with our membership. And that is, of course, because we offer this because we recognize how important it is to take control not just of your web presence in terms of your website and blog, but also your reputation and what is available out there about you online. So if you're curious about that, we recently did a webinar on the general subject of reputation management, as well as our Bird Eye add-on that is now available to view on demand over at our website. So lastly, I want to bring up what could be described as the 1% difference makers. But before I discuss what they are, I want to mention why it's important to implement these difference makers now and not at some earlier point in your foundation and growth strategies. And this is one of those things that can trip up attorneys, these 1% difference makers. This is an area where attorneys sometimes want to obsess over implementing these bits right out of the gate, but if you do that, they're not going to have the effect that they will if you do them once the foundation has been established. So let's talk about what they are. The first is semantic markup. So if you're not familiar with this term, semantic markup refers to the code that's used to reinforce the meaning of your web pages to search engines, which can help them be found when potential clients make relevant searches. So, of course, humans have eyes, and we can look at something and make a determination about what a web page means or what it's about, but search engines can't do that. So the markup, this code, helps search engines understand what a page is about and whether it's relevant to somebody's interests when they make a relevant query. So with LALinux, our system automatically adds attorney-specific markup that is strategic and effective and helps your work get found by potential clients. And it also doesn't require you to quit your day job to learn how to code or anything like that. Next up is page speed. And again, this is one of those issues that attorneys sometimes obsess about. And we brought it up in the Grow webinar for this DUI practice area series, but I bring it up again because I really do think it's valuable to understand what role this plays in your law firm's web presence. I will reiterate briefly what was discussed in the last webinar, and that's this. If you were to take a completely blank website, like a blank white page, that is a site that is likely to score a perfect score on a site speed calculator. The problem is, of course, is that there is nothing on it. It is useless. But as you keep adding elements to your site, you're going to see a decrease in that site speed. And that should be fairly minor. But if you start adding lots of heavy elements, unnecessary bells and whistles, things like that, then you're really going to see that number drop. So what we explained in that webinar, if you didn't join us for it, that it's about striking that balance between, on the one hand, a completely empty website, which wouldn't do you any good, and a site that's overloaded with elements that slow it down. Now, once you're at the domination phase of your growth, there is something else to consider here. Where site speed is concerned, so long as your site is reasonably fast, so we're talking 70th percentile, 80 in mobile, it doesn't make too much of a difference. However, if you are getting, 15,000 visits in a day, and you're going to get some of those from mobile on a 3G connection, which could mean a slow loading site. And as we know, if a site loads too slowly, a potential client's first line of defense is just to leave and to go find another site that answers their question. So getting big numbers means that there's something additional that you have to balance, not just the elements of the site, but also the number of visitors that you're receiving. Marketing automation. So when you have few visitors at first, your goal should be to get visitors to your site. As your site grows and your visits grow, this is the time, as Rachel explained, to build up your options. So it won't be enough anymore to have your options be contact my firm or leave. And, that's not even enough in the earliest phases. You want to give your potential clients lots of text information about their case or matter or problem. But when you start hitting those big numbers, then it's time to think about a variety of ways to present that information. So ebooks, white papers, other collateral, newsletter subscriptions. And while you have to create those or hire somebody to do it for you, sending these items to potential clients are things that can be handled efficiently by things like marketing automation software. And I've written blogs on a number of popular marketing automation software tools for attorneys that you can find over at our blog. But that way, once you've done the work or you've hired someone to do that work of creating that collateral, then you can use marketing automation software to send it for you and create that connection between you and your client, even when it's outside of office hours and you're already home. Marketing automation can help you do more work and reach more clients around the clock. Lastly is some items to experiment with. So when you're at the domination phase, when you're at the biggest phase of your growth, CTAs are something to think about. You can start experimenting with the calls to action that you feature on your website. You can try different action words, try different phrasing, and see what draws in more clients. Form fields. Form fields are another good thing to experiment with. So your potential clients are busy just as you are, and they don't want to have to do any more work than what is necessary to reach you. So where you can, see if you can edit down your form fields to whatever is absolutely the most necessary, experiment with different types of forms. And there was a good example of this not too long ago in the news with Expedia. So this is a story about how to root out hidden profits with analytics as well. But Expedia discovered this interesting problem. They were noticing that they had many customers who were clicking their buy now button, so their call to action, but then they never went on to complete whatever their transaction was. So what was happening? Here we have people who, as far as leading indicators of purchase intent go, they said, appeared to be ready to finish that transaction, but they didn't. So when Expedia conducted this research, what they found was something that was oddly simple. They had an optional field under name, which was company. And what happened was that it confused the customers who filled out company field with their bank name. So after putting in their bank name, these customers then went on to enter the address of the bank rather than their home address. And when it came time to verify their credit card, it would fail because it wasn't the address of the card holder. Now, when Expedia fixed this problem, they increased their profits by $12 million. So this, of course, is an extreme example, but my point here is to minimize any sort of possibility for user error or frustration that might happen with your form fields. Don't make your potential clients work any harder than they have to. Expedia said later that the company had found a number of other issues like this by using their data to their advantage and also by really paying attention to their customers. Another thing, think about setting expectations on your form. So if you say that you'll return calls in 5 minutes, and that works while you're a solo practitioner, but maybe as things grow and you get more clients or whatever, that's not true anymore. It's the difference between not being able to meet that expectation, or either changing what that expectation is, or having a better intake system with 2 or 3 people available to answer the telephone and field those calls. Last thing is call tracking. So at LALinux, we can help you integrate things like CallRail, which can help you measure your calls and see where they're coming from, so you can see what's driving them and then use that information to fine-tune your marketing even more. So this is the last webinar in our Start, Grow, Dominate series. And again, if you missed the first 2, feel free to go check them out over on the LALinux website, or any of our other free on-demand webinars and blog posts. All of those resources are available to you for free to help you better understand how the internet works and how your potential clients are using it to find you. If you have questions about your legal marketing, or you are ready to take your online marketing to the next level, we are here to help and we're happy to talk to you. So feel free to contact us through any of the above methods here. You can submit a consult request from our main website at LALinux.com. You can always call us at 800-713-0161 or shoot us an email at info@LALinux.com. So that concludes today's webinar. I'm now going to end the recording and open it up for questions if there are any.